Okay, good morning. My name is Sean Amsbury. I am the Friendly Neighborhood Help Desk guy, have been for 6 years now. And today we're going to be talking about SharePoint Basic and focusing on the V4 environment. Today you're going to understand kind of what SharePoint is, how the files are organized, sections of SharePoint pages and what those sections mean, what they're driven by. How to create and edit web pages, how to import documents, how to use images on a page, and get into how to establish links. All right, first thing you always have to do is log in, of course, and your login URL is going to follow the pattern that you see on the screen. It'll be the authoring-cms.oregon.gov and then your agency. And the most successful place to log in is not actually your home page. Some users can do that just fine. Others actually have to go to the _layouts view list.aspx, and all that is looking at the view of the back side of your site. That will always take you to the view all site content view, where you actually see your pages library and your images library, your lists, and any subsites to the site that you're looking at. Your credentials, your agency SPOC, single point of contact is what that means. A few of the bigger agencies have multiple single points of contact. They decide who does and who does not have permissions. They make a request to the service desk to make you a SharePoint user. We make you a user, and then they determine where your permissions go. As a new user, I'm sure probably most of you are SharePoint users, and some of you recent. You have received an email detailing what your access means. If you have questions about where in the site you have access, your agency SPOC, or the one in charge of the web, the one who's ultimately responsible for what happens on the web, is the one who's going to determine where those permissions are. The service desk just makes you a user. They don't get into the particular permissions. We do, however, reset passwords when you're not able to do that on your own. There is instructions included in that email about resetting your password. Some folks look for it in the SharePoint environment, and it's not there. You have to go to a separate application to manage your account. You'll get a hint as to whether or not you have permissions in a particular place when you're logged into the authoring environment by the ribbon. If you have a ribbon, you have some kind of permission in that area. If you do not see a ribbon, you can be successfully logged in and just not have permissions there. And so, assuming that you're in a place where you can see the ribbon, your first hint will be, or your first place to go will be the Site Actions menu. Everything pretty much starts with Site Actions. Your site collections versus subsites, SharePoint is a content management architecture, so to speak, and it's organized into site collections, which is the overall, if you work for ODOT, Oregon.gov /ODOT is the site collection. ODOT/DMV would be a subsite to ODOT, and is simply referred to as a site. And these things are referred to as parents, children, and sibling sites. If you have another site under ODOT at the same level of DMV, those would be sibling sites. And for navigation, that can be important. Libraries. In each site collection, there are a collection of libraries. They are very much like folders. SharePoint just wants to call them libraries. They hold documents of all kinds. They hold your web pages, for instance. Your pages library must hold all of your .aspx web pages. That is any page that is made with a template that you draw up from SharePoint. If they don't, it is possible that they can bring down your site. We've had a couple of subsites that have been just basically dead for editing for weeks because we had to completely rebuild everything about them and then try to fit them back in under their parent site. And that takes a lot of time, a lot of man-hours to do that. And it all came down to a page or a number of pages that did not live in the pages directory, and somebody tried to move them to the pages directory, and that brought it down. So it's very important. Anything built with a SharePoint template needs to go in the pages library. Your other libraries can be almost anything the agency really wants. Some agencies have libraries for audio content and video content. Some agencies separate out their PDFs from their other documents in a library. It's really up to how your agency wants to organize things. Each library can have its own set of permissions, and so you may have permissions in the documents library if it's your job to upload documents for availability to the web, but you would not necessarily have permissions in the pages library to do any editing to web pages. And so that's all, again, up to your agency SPOC and where they determine that you should have your permissions at. You'll see in your SharePoint sites that there are pre-built libraries for images and documents. Those are starting points. Each library can be divided up into folders, and you guys can organize any way you want to. Try to make it make sense so that somebody following you when you get your promotion and somebody has to fill your place, try to make your organization make sense so that they can easily follow in your footsteps and continue on the same plan. The other thing you'll notice in your site are lists. They are basically sets of reusable information. Many pages can use all or some of the list items in any given list, depending upon how it's set up. There's a relationship between many web parts and many lists that hopefully we'll get into, we'll have time to later in this session, where a web part can be set to draw certain list items based on each one of those list items' characteristics, the way that a specific field was filled in the list item. And so this can be very time-saving. It can be very dynamic, but it does take some forethought and planning to figure out, okay, how do we want to use this list? Where do we want to display the information? And how are we going to filter for that information so that you can have everything you need in your list? These things are all SharePoint-wide. It doesn't matter being V3 or V4. SharePoint site pieces or site components are all the same. So there's no big change there. If you want to start playing with something, you're not going to affect anything by creating a new list and then setting up kind of a sandbox page, I guess, as long as you have permission to do that. It won't affect the way your site is organized, or it won't negatively affect anything. Check with your SPOC before you create a subsite. Also check with your SPOC before you go to change any navigation structure. The biggest change in V4 is the look and feel of our website. This is kind of, it's going to show up small on your pages, and I know that, and I'm sorry. Anyway, what you're going to notice is we've now got what's called a splash image at the top of these pages, and a couple of splash images so far have been really, really big. That's not the best practice. They look really pretty, and we want our sites to look pretty, but they're far more efficient if we have something less than a 5 megabyte photograph up there. We have a separate class all about images. We had it last month. There is a recorded webinar on GovSpace about preparing your images for use on the web, and I always recommend that. It's very, very important to make sure your images are ready for web before you upload them to SharePoint. Okay, the other major difference is the middle of the page. We have our task boxes, and the task boxes make it very easy for the public to get to the pages they want to be to. They put the most, let's say, the most commonly used features of your site right out front and center. And the one thing you will notice is that we've gone away from the old newspaper type setup that we used to have with the V3, and most agencies are still under, and gone to a very functional, task-based interface with the public so that, okay, I don't have to read through a front page of the newspaper to find what I want. If I want that kind of detail, I can get it by diving deeper into the site, but first I want to go to my form, or first I want to hear about the, an ODA here, drought and disaster preparedness. You make it very quick. And so through a lot of user testing, this was come up with as the best design for our public to get to our content. The feature boxes down 2/3 of the way down the page are just content boxes, text. You can see here web parts can go in there, a list of links, whatever. They're kind of free. You can have, I think you can have 2, 3, or 4 boxes wide on a V4 page. And then the footer is the about Oregon.gov is hard set in the page. Your address, I believe, is set. I don't think the address is based in a list item, or a footer list can populate the contact information, and I believe it populates this links list down here as well. Always keep in mind that SharePoint is a Microsoft product, and so you want to save your work regularly. The tricky part of SharePoint is that save is not really what you think it is. It does not have the same effect as it does in Word or Excel or anything else. Save is only for you. SharePoint started out being an intranet tool, and it's very pigeonholed as far as who gets to see what. And so when you save something, those changes are only visible to you. And if you log out of that page without making the change solid, then nobody else can see it, nobody else can work with it or critique it. And next time you come back, somebody else may have overridden it, and your changes may no longer be there. And so save is kind of a misnomer for SharePoint. What you want to do is check in your page often. If you are spending hours designing a web page so that it's just right and it sends your public viewers to exactly the right places that they want to be, and you've got 4 or 5 hours into this thing so far, please, please, please check that page in so that you have a restore point. If you do not check it in and something happens, then there is no regaining the work that you lost. We do not have the ability to restore any work that was not checked in. Okay, so as much as we would, we can go back into the versions and we can get into the recycle bin, and we can, we'll do everything we can, but if there was not a version created, then there's nothing to go back to. Minor versions are not published, and they are indicated by being a number to the right of the decimal point, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. Major versions are identified with whole numbers, and they are versions that have been published to the web. And generally speaking, once a major version is published, the minor versions under it go away. So you might have a page of version 1 that you are editing, and you're not quite ready for prime time yet, so you check it in as a minor version, and so it becomes version 1.1. If you look at the versions of that page, version 1 is still identified as the published public version. Version 1.1 is the work in progress. And as long as it's checked in, then everybody else can see your changes and work with them and review them, critique them, whatever. You can get up to as many minor versions as you want to. And then if you have version 1.8, 1.9, 1.11, 1.12, and then boom, you say, okay, we're ready now, we're going to go to version 2 and publish. Version 2 takes over, and all those minor versions go away. And so in your page history, you'll have version 1.0, and now version 2.0 will be identified as your published work. And so make sure, long story short, don't trust save. Be sure to check in your page regularly so that you don't lose a lot of work. With images, as I said before, think responsibly. there's no consideration anymore for DPI, dots per inch. It's not even an issue with the LCD screens, and nearly everyone is using the LCD or LED screen. It just doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be very big to look great on the web. Most images can be less than 50K and work just fine and look just fine. And quite honestly, nobody's printing web pages anymore, so you don't even have to think about what it's going to look like when it prints. It really doesn't matter. If they want or need an image in print quality for some reason, they can always contact you. Because if you put it on the web, chances are it's not a private image. They can contact you. You can send them a good quality one. So anyway, work them down. Use your favorite editing software or use the Microsoft Picture Manager, I think it's called. It's been included with Microsoft, the operating systems, since Vista, if I'm not mistaken. And it, in 3 steps, will bring your image down to exactly what the web wants for responsibility. All right, I want to make sure everybody's still with me and that we're ready to move on into some deeper web stuff. Sorry the introduction is so long, but there are people who have, there's new hires that have never worked with SharePoint before, so we need a little bit of introduction there. About ready to get into the actual sites and the actual pages. So do we have any questions or concerns before we jump in there?
Sean, I have a quick question. This is Carrie Fry. So
sure,
in regards to the images, what kind of parameters are they going to give us? I mean, do we only have to pick certain types of pictures to put on there, or can we just do what our agency will allow us to do?
For the splash image?
Yes.
Like the big one?
And then also for the boxes below, the task boxes.
Okay, the task boxes are not quite as critical because I don't think they change much, but they don't get really huge, and so they don't have to, to fill a space that big on a web page doesn't take very much memory, and so it's just going to be whatever image you want, just make it responsibly sized memory-wise, its footprint, so that it's not taking up a whole bunch of space for that little bitty image. The splash image is where we're really running into problems more commonly with agencies that understandably want something very, very big and flashy and pretty, and okay, we can do that, but we still need to be reasonable, and when it blows all the way up to its largest extent, it's not going to look great.
So
it's
just a size issue then? It's not because there are a lot of different types of pictures, not just photographs. And I was wondering if there were limitations on putting on something there that's not a photograph, but maybe something that is in already the Microsoft Office library that's more applicable to what kind of information we're trying to share.
Non-photographs are typically smaller, and we love them.
Okay.
So yeah, you notice this is just a splash of color here, and it's got a gradient to it. It's not as good as solid color blurb or blobs in there because it has the gradient that takes up memory, but it's better than a photograph from that standpoint in that it loads quickly. And so when that time comes and we're working with you on your site, we can go over some options and try to do what you want to do, but make some suggestions so that it's more web friendly if need be. If you guys have it and you're already small with your image and everything's good, then no, there's not really any limitations. It's just a matter of responsibility to our mobile viewers who might not be on the best connection.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. Any others?
Yeah, this is Mike Kimsey. I have a question about the splash picture. On our page, it seems like it's dynamic and not static in size, and I understand why, but it's having a problem loading correctly, and I was wondering what we can do about that.
Your best bet, Mike, is to submit a service desk ticket on that so we can take a look at it.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Any others? Okay. So now we are looking at a SharePoint V4 Oregon.gov site. This is the way your home pages will look as well. So the first thing you'll notice, hopefully, is that there is a ribbon here. This portion of the page up here is what we call the ribbon. Site Actions is your most important button, and it will take you to various places in the site that you'll need to use. Right now, let's go and take a look at what's behind. Well, first let's do an overview. You saw in that SharePoint slide, this is a little bigger and a little nicer to look at. Here's the splash image that we're talking about. Is this big, the blue with the gradient is the splash image. This one's pretty simple, still fairly attractive if you like blue, and smaller than a photograph. Inside of that, we have our feature stories. Feature stories no longer have text of their own in V4. They are just headlines and links to deeper content. As many feature stories, well, within reason, as you want, can go in this web part, and they have links at the bottom to change between the featured stories. You can have, probably 5 or 6 of them before it gets looking weird here. They are not automatically rotating by default because rotating content violates, well, I can't say it violates. It's not best practices for accessibility. People want to see what they want to see, not what we force them to see. And so by default, it does not rotate anymore. It just gets clicked between the tabs that are down here. We will help you come up with, if you don't have a solid idea, we will help you come up with the image for your site. If you don't have a particular logo in mind or yours doesn't lend itself well to web use, we can give you a hand with that. And then your agency title will go here in this space. Below that is your agency mission statement if you want it. If you do not want it, you can use it as an announcement area. This particular area is only visible if there is content in the area. If I don't have content there, then nobody sees anything that they would miss. So you can add and subtract it if you want to. Like I say, using it as an announcement area, you could, when something is important that people need to be aware of, you can have content here, and then when the crisis goes away or the season changes or what have you, you can delete this content and it will not affect your site one way or the other. These are the task boxes. These are the things that really help to bring the public to where they need to be in your site. Somebody comes to a government website, they are not looking for, they're not looking for typically human interest type stuff. They're not looking for the most popular things going on in your agency. They're looking for forms. They're looking for crisis reports. They're looking for seasonal information that may change from year to year. Thinking along the lines of the Department of Revenue, as tax season approaches or the year changes, and there's all kinds of things that accountants and tax people and even business owners and sometimes the public need to know, and they want to be able to get to that stuff quickly. And so we've gone to this task-based format that will allow you to set up your information so that it's well organized as far as the public can see it and make decisions about where to go, and also easy easily recognizable for them to get the information they need. And then below those are these text boxes, and like I said before, these are pretty much just rich content areas, and anything goes. You can have text, you can have lists, you can have links, you can have web parts put in there, whatever you like. And then portions of the footer are editable. That is driven by a list on the back side. So the home page is the biggest difference, and that's really the glaring piece, that somebody comes to a site that just moved to V4, and boom, this is what they're going to see, and they're not going to see that newspaper anymore. So it's really a nice change. You notice that we have these little text boxes, these little kind of, voice boxes up here, cartoon type things. That's our answer to the social media. A lot of people miss that. We're still working with that icon, so that's not set in stone. We're still under usability with that icon to see what people are going to recognize, to see that, hey, that's where you go if you want to hook up with their Facebook page or like them on Twitter or however that all works. I'm not versed in the social media. So anyway, we're still working with that, and if you have any suggestions, I'd like to hear them. And then the search box, of course, Oregon.gov, all of our sites are trying to be far more search-based than they have been in the past, so that's already included as well. One thing that you need to know that you will always get with your V4 template is a demos subsite. Anything that is not just a web page is going to be described and demonstrated in these pages. As we add functionality, this list of pages will grow so that you can see, okay, wait, filterable items to criteria, what does that mean? Well, you click in there, like I just did, so it'll take a second, and you can see, okay, there's a list of stuff here in the middle of the page, and filtered by type, and also, okay, so I can search sort of with 2 different criteria, so I can narrow it down to just a few list items and make my life easier to find things. So the demonstrations will actually put to work what you see in the options for page layouts. And in some cases, like this is not a page layout, this is just a system of web parts that we've come up with that works in a pretty cool way. So always pay attention to that demos area. Again, that is included. It's not necessarily in the navigation when we deliver your site, but it is included as a subsite. And so let's see where we're going to find that. Let's go to the back of the site, and to do that, we're going to hit Site Actions, and we're going to go to View All Site Content. There are 2 ways to view the content of your site. That's one of them. This is a very comfortable environment for me. Some people prefer a different kind of more Windows-y environment, which you can find under Manage Content and Structure. This is the other way to look behind your site. We go basically from bigger to smaller as we move from the left to the right. Agency name, this icon represents the site collection. Each of these icons that are indented to the right indicate subsites. And then depending on what is highlighted in this list, the highlighted item on the left side is displayed in the right side. So what's highlighted on the left is displayed on the right. It's a little more like Windows Explorer, where you're viewing pages, folders and subfolders and documents within those folders. Either way, you see what's all on the back side. This shows you the site at a time. The Manage Content and Structure shows you the entire site collection, at least so far as you have permissions to view it. I'm going back to View All Site Content. And so this is where we're going to find our site, basically. Everything having to do with our site is in the site content. We have our different libraries, pages, images, and documents in this case. Those are the 3 libraries that come with the site. All web pages need to be in the Pages library. Images and documents, well, They should hold images and documents, but nothing's going to break if they don't. And then underneath that, you'll have the list. If your site was to have a subsite, you would see them down here in Sites and Workspaces. Those are the three areas that we actually work with in SharePoint for Oregon.gov. The other thing you're going to find back here is the recycle bin. That recycle bin is a private folder. If you delete a web page on accident, you are the only one who is going to see it in your recycle bin. To everybody else, it will just be gone. Your agency Spock does not get to look into your recycle bin and find a page that you accidentally deleted and then went on vacation with. They have to come to us, and we might be able to see it, depending upon how long it's been and some other variables. We may be able to recover it. But as a user, your recycle bin is private to you. And so I would definitely check, make sure with your agency Spot that deleting a page is the appropriate thing to do. Now, if you've just, you've created a test page because you want to see how this web part works and you're not quite sure if that's what you want to see on your live page, no problem. Go ahead, create your page, don't check it in, touch your web part up and do your testing and then delete the page just to get it out of the way and everything's great. I'm talking about pages that have gone in production and are published. Make sure that your agency Spock is on board. Let's look at a library. We're going to be using these after all. Let's look into the documents library. If we are going to establish a link to a document, we need documents first, right? So it looks like a folder. It's just called a library. If I'm going to add anything, this is the most typical thing people do with the documents library, is they add documents to it. And so I will go to the Documents tab, and notice there are a few things that Chrome won't do like this that you have to be in IE in order to do. And so let's go ahead. We're going to upload a document. Choose File opens up your machine. You're going to view your local drives, your local machine here. And let's just upload a report. Public information anyway. Okay. So after choosing one, you can see its name here. Add as a new version to existing files. You almost always want to do that because sometimes these files are ongoing. A good example is the salary reports that are out there on Oregon.gov. It's the same file that gets updated many, many times a year. And if we were to upload it as a new document every time, it would have a different name. We'd have to go change our coding and change the links and change all kinds of things. And so if you're uploading a document that is a modification of an earlier document, you definitely want to name it the same and add it as a new version. You can choose your destination folder. It is much easier just to be where you want to be when you upload your document. So if you want to be in images, go there. If you want to be in documents, make sure you're in documents and just leave that field alone. By default, it will upload to the library that you're in. Some agencies want you to put comments here, identify why it's uploaded, or what the context of the document is, or what have you. If you want comments, go ahead and click OK. That is as easy as it is to upload a document. Your new document will be identified as new. In some libraries, this document will need to be published. This is not one of them, but if you select the document with the little checkbox in the box next to its name, if you select it and the Publish button becomes available to you, the document is not available to the public. And so you'll need to publish it and go through any workflows that are in place. That's different for every agency, so talk to your agency SPOC about that. But typically what you'll do is either just click Publish or there'll be a Submit button. And if there's a Submit button, then you will start a workflow for your agency approvers to go through and approve the work, that yes, this is a document we need, or yes, it's appropriate for the what have you. Workflow is a separate issue, and like I say, some libraries have it, some don't. Most documents and images libraries are not subject to workflow. Most of them, if you put an image or a document up to them, they are immediately available to the public. There's no link on the site to them, but if somebody has the specific URL to that document, they will be able to view it. And so something to keep in mind when you're uploading documents. And that's all there is to it. When you're uploading, you just upload a document and choose your document, tell SharePoint, yes, that's the one I want, and up you go. This is now available for use on the web. We have exactly the same thing in the images library. Okay, the only difference is you're going to see a thumbnail of your image instead of the list item. Again, when you upload an image, if you select that image and you see Publish over here, then you need to click Publish or Submit. Exactly the same deal. Images in one, documents in the other. Going back to Site Actions, I'm going to view all site content again. And we'll open Pages for a moment. Now, this is where all of your web pages are going to be. There are cases where you may have an HTML document that will serve as a web page that won't be in this library, and that's fine. But anything that has used a page layout over here in this area, anything that has used a page layout needs to be inside of this pages library. You can tell what a page is using right here by the page layout that's identified. So you can kind of identify, well, I know that it's a replicant page, and so in the old V3 anyway. And so you're going to look in here for V3 replicant layout, or I know that it's a two-column wide page, meaning it's got navigation on the left and a body section on the right, or that it's a three-column wide page. And so you can identify what's going on there. When you have trouble with pages, one of the things that we appreciate is that you identify what the page layout is, and then try a couple of other pages. Just get into them, try the same kind of an edit. You don't have to save it or anything. Just see if you can be successful. And because if there's a problem with that specific page layout, that can really help us to narrow down our diagnostic path and where the fix lies. And so it's there's a few ways to use page layout identifications in that text. This tells you who the page is checked out to, which is important because there are an awful lot of service desk calls that come in to say, hey, I'm clicking edit and nothing is happening. It must be broken. No, actually, 9 times out of 10, if you click edit and nothing happens, the page is checked out to somebody else. And if it's checked out to somebody else, you can't open it for editing because in order to edit it, it has to be checked out to you. The act of opening the page for editing does that checkout for you. And so you can always come back in a page. There is a button, I'll show you that, that says View All Pages, and it'll give you this view, basically, of the pages library, and you can see, hey, this page is checked out to this worker, and I need to talk to them. If a page is checked out to a person that is not available, which does happen, we can, in fact, your agency SPOC should be able to override the checkout. The unfortunate part about overriding a checkout is all the work that was done during that checkout is lost. That can be tragic sometimes. So we try to avoid that, but it can be done. We really hate to destroy work, and we just never know. You know, at the service desk, we don't know how much has gone into it, how many changes were made, because the most recent changes made to that page are private to the author still. So you know, there's no way to see that. The other thing you can tell from this view is the approval status. Are these pages approved, which means they're published? Are they pending, which means there is a workflow of some kind going on with them? Or are they in draft mode, which means that the current version of this page has not been published to the web? And so you can, sometimes that's useful information as well. Approved, pending, or draft. Public, in workflow, or not published. Okay, any questions before we get into page editing?
I have one, Sean. This is Carrie Fry again. So are we still allowed to add additional columns within these libraries since we have a lot of webmasters, it helps us to have a column who identify who's in charge of those particular pieces. Are we still allowed to do that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, one thing to keep in mind about V4 is that the core SharePoint features and abilities are still SharePoint. So all we did is wrap it in a prettier package and make it a little more usable on the public side. All the SharePoint stuff still is there behind it. Other questions?
Don?
Yes.
I had a question. When you're in a library, what is the difference between the add new item and the upload and document or whatever?
Okay. Having a new document, like this is the pages library, and so it will give a...
Not new document, the one down below the list where it says add new item?
Oh, I see. That's basically I take you to upload.
So it's the same thing?
Yes, same
Okay.
same as this.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, there's a lot of redundant ways to do things. In most of these, actually, SharePoint's not alone in that. There are several ways to get a lot of things done in content management systems.
So, Sean, this is Carrie again. Do you still have all of the pre-created fields that you have to fill in when you add a new document or whatever? You know how they had all there were owners, and there was a whole page full of information that technically you were supposed to fill out and identify on the current system. Is that going to be the same for the V4, or has that been reduced significantly? You know what I'm talking about?
I believe you're talking about the properties of a page?
Right. It had just a plethora of properties that were just not applicable to our normal everyday.
Okay. In most cases, the only thing that is required of properties, now this properties page contains everything that the page itself contains. But as far as actually putting something in here, the only required field that I know of is name. And some agencies ask that description be required as well. If your agency doesn't ask for it, then description won't be required, and name is automatically filled in. You should not have any, any of this tedium to go through to make a page or a document work.
Is there a requirement that they are actually there, or can we remove them?
That
if we go to our property library, or can we remove them if our agency's determined we don't need them?
That's a good question. I'm going to check on that. I don't think you can remove them.
Because if you go into edit properties, I mean, that's where the big list shows up, and I've never tried to delete them because I didn't know if I'd get in trouble by deleting them. But I mean, because when we add columns that we actually want information put in, we have to kind of place them strategically so people don't have to just dig through all of this other stuff.
Right, I understand. But yeah, let me look into that. I am certain that there are certain values here that SharePoint has to have, and that may be why name is required. That may be the only one.
Right. Well,
but,
I didn't want to mess up any other features that our version 4 will offer us by deleting a property that is being used someplace else and I'm just not aware of.
Right. Right.
Like a search feature or something like that. And I know you don't have to view them. That's not the point. It's just that when we're adding new information, we always get this big, huge list of properties.
Right.
And I know that we can hide them also there, because that's an option too. But just want to know what our parameters are and what we can do with it.
Yeah, that's a great question, one I've never heard before. So that'll be interesting to dig up. I just made a note to myself to go chase down that answer, and so I will email you on the side on this one and tell you what I found.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, any other questions? All right. Okay, so now we're going to create a page. For you folks who are new to SharePoint, this will be kind of the first of the exciting part. When we're in the Pages library, we want to activate the Documents tab and go with New Document. The reason we want to do that is because creating a document or creating a page in this library by any other method will automatically create a default page layout in the root of the Pages library. So if you're 14 folders deep, and hopefully don't have 14 folders, but if you're deep in your folder structure and you say that you want to add a new item, let's say, and it allows you to establish a new page, it will automatically put it way up at the root, and you won't see it in that 14-page or 14-folder deep area that you're in. And so the method you want to use is Document, New Document, and then a V4 page. Which one you choose doesn't really matter, because in this step, you'll be able to choose exactly which of the page layouts that you want to use. You notice, hopefully, let's go back so I can point this out. You notice that your choices here are very limited. And so just make sure that you're going to choose a V4 something and say, I want a new document that is an agency V4 standard page. And then on this page is where you actually get to choose from all of the different page layouts that are here. And for different reasons, this list of page layouts may grow over time. The functionality of the V4 sites surely is growing, and sometimes that needs a new page layout. You will want to give your page a title. The title field will be displayed on the page. Your description, again, if your agency wants it, please do. And then your URL name is how your page is going to appear up here in the actual location bar of your site. And so what generally people like to do, or agencies like to do, is to shorten this. And then we can clarify it with an underscore if we want to. So if you've got a big, long title up here, you do not have to have the same big, long title here, but your URL name should make some sense and be decipherable to other people as well, so that they can tell, okay, this is the page I'm looking for when they're looking at that Pages library. Should be short, but it should be descriptive. And we have all these to choose from. You're probably only going to want to have one page in each site that uses that home page layout, just for clarity's sake. And so you have the agency home page, and here, yeah, we have 2 featured boxes, 3 featured boxes. those are the ones at the very bottom of the page, the ones that I said were just the regular rich text areas. And then you can have, any of these agency homepage. These are all variations of that homepage layout. And then you have standard pages that are your typical pages. You have 1 column, 2 columns, 3 columns. There are descriptions of these on GovSpace in the V4 documents area of the eGov training space. If you need to know where that is, shoot me a message at the help desk and I will point you in the right direction. It is also mentioned in the initial email going to new SharePoint users. And so new people are directed there from the get-go. For our purposes, let's go to a very, very common page layout. We have the standard 2 columns page layout. And we click Create, and SharePoint goes through its thing and does it. And lo and behold, here is our page. Notice that when I create a page, it is checked out to me. That page is not visible to anyone else. And so if you have not checked your page in yet, and you have some trouble or you need to know how to do something, and you call me at the help desk and tell me, this is the name of my page, it doesn't matter what I do, I won't be able to see it until you check it in. And so if you're calling the service desk for help, make sure that page has been checked in at least at some point so that I can see it. And it's not a private document just for you. To get this thing open, we just click its name, and the 2-column attribute of this page is that this is the first column, this navigation area here, left nav. And then over here in the white space is the second column, and this is where the content of your page goes. There is also 3 column setups where there is a narrower middle column for content, and then a narrow, about the same width as the first column on the left-hand side. There's a narrow column on the right-hand side where you can put more navigation or web parts, what have you, whatever your page needs, if you need a 3-column wide kind of a thing to best display your information. So this is our brand new page, and just like anything else, we're going to tell SharePoint that we want to edit it. There is a small edit icon here in the default ribbon. There is, under Site Actions, a button to edit page. And in the Page tab of the ribbon, there is a button here to edit page. Any of those will give you the same result. SharePoint will turn a bit, and you'll see that you're in edit mode because you now have this pretty blue outline around the content area. For the first column here, the navigation column, this is not editable on the page. This is determined by a site setting that we will take a look at. The only thing that's editable here is actually the content of the page. In this content area, pretty much anything goes. The SharePoint will strip out certain HTML like embed code and like JavaScript. So those kinds of things can't go in this part of the page just on their own. The things we can put here on their own is, of course, text. You can stylize your text, but I would recommend, always recommend, that when you go to stylize your text, you kind of stay out of this area over here, this where you can choose the fonts. And in fact, oh good, dude, they've disabled the font selection. These things, okay, if you want a superscript, then fine, use that. But the problem with this area is that it does not, all these things do is add style upon style upon style upon style in the HTML. And when you go to change that, when you select this text, or worse yet, part of the text, you're not quite sure which HTML is being selected along with your text. And so you can get some nested styles going on in there and some conflicting styles going on in there, and your text can really become a mess unless you are very careful and get it right the first time. If you get into a mess, then what you can do is select this text again. And notice I started my selection way out here and down, and then moved up over that text, and then selected up to the next line. That almost ensures that I grab all of the HTML that's been applied to this little piece of text here, and I use my Style Scrub button. They call it clear format, but I like Style Scrub better. It sounds better. And I click that, and my styling should all go away. And when I highlight that or click into it, I don't see any of these buttons lighting up. So that means that my styles are gone and the HTML is probably pretty clean, and that's the way we want it. So what I recommend is when you want to stylize some text, that you go to this button, the Styles button, and there are two things to select from there. And then you've got your markup styles on this side. And these are where your predefined styles that actually fit within the Oregon.gov style guide, so to speak. That's where those will fit. So there's my text there, and here's my markup styles. And you can see that basically what we have is a few lightly styled headings that we use for stylized text, but those are what's approved or what was decided upon for our style. If you know HTML, then by all means, you can click into this area here. You see the cursor is in there. And here is your ability to edit the HTML source. This will open a very simple window. I usually, if I have to do this, I copy this and put it into a text editor like Notepad or WordPad, something along those lines, because then it color codes things and I can identify where it is, start and stops, where spans start and stop, and where my anchors are, and where my, everything else. It makes it very, very easy to edit the HTML in a different application, and then copy my edits and paste them back into here. That's when I have to do HTML. If you don't know HTML, don't worry about it. You don't have to. It always helps. You're a web editor, but it's not required. So, and then of course your alignment stuff that you can do if you want to. This is usually, there may be times when you want something centered on a page. These aren't used a whole lot. You can also make bullet points and numbered bullets, etc. So this is just basic HTML editing here. And remember, in everything that you do here, remember that this is an HTML editor, not a word processor. And so there are limitations to what it can do. If you can't do it in HTML, then you can't do it here. This is a web page. So keep that in mind, especially when we get into tables. We're going to work on inserting some things here in a minute. You're going to see a table. Remember that a HTML table has limitations. It's not an Excel spreadsheet, and it will not perform for you the way you might want it to. And that's just it's not a spreadsheet. Keep in mind that it's only a style that is applied to some content for organization on the page. So beyond text, what are we going to do with the page? Well, one of the most common things is to put an image on the page. And so how do we do that? Oops, click out of there. Notice how that ribbon is responsive. I accidentally clicked over here in this area to the left, and my editing ribbon went away because it realized, oh, well, you don't want to edit anymore. And that was my mistake, of course. So now it's back. And so using the ribbon, I'm going to look at editing tools, and I've got the Insert tab. If I'm going to add anything to this page that's not text, I'm going to insert it. And so I'm going to insert, and I'm going to choose a picture. Now, there's 3 ways to do this. Real quickly, from computer, that's just going to open up your uploading tool, and you get to go choose the picture from your computer and upload it to your images library, and then it'll place it on the page. From address, which means that you're jumping out to a web address to pull a picture into your page, I do not recommend that unless you or your agency, if you own the server and the image, then go ahead. But if you don't have control of the server or you don't own the image, in other words, if you see a beautiful picture of Crater Lake out on bobswebsite.com and the image is, you can't get a hold of Bob, but it's out there in the public, so, there's no problem. Well, you may be violating copyright laws. And let's say that you bring that image in, and that image is called img_01.jpg, okay? Now, not knowing Bob, you're not quite sure what img_01.jpg is going to be tomorrow. And in some cases, it could be something that you would not want to put on a government page. If you have no control over it, don't use it. If you don't own it, don't use it. You have possibly very embarrassing things to go on, and you have copyright laws to worry about. The most commonly done, and the one I recommend, is from SharePoint. That means that you have already prepared this image on your local machine, and you have gone through the upload process to put it in your images library, and now you're telling this page to go find it in the images library. And so we're going to click from SharePoint. That means it's already been uploaded. We go to images and notice that we have access to the whole site here. So you're not limited by only what's below you. You can reach your whole site when you insert an item. And I select an image. Its name is identified here in the location URL, so I know I'm pretty much good to go there. SharePoint does its thing. That's bigger than I wanted it to be. Okay, the reason it's blue is because it's currently selected. Okay, if I click off of that image, then that's how it's going to look. If I click back onto the image, you'll notice that I get a Picture Tools ribbon. Again, the ribbon is responsive, so it will anticipate what you want based on where your cursor is. Picture Tools, I'll want to go in here and design, add some character to this, or characteristics to this picture, some settings. In the Picture Tools design menu, I can change the picture. I can just redo this and choose something different. I can manually change the web address. So if I had another picture of, say, Mickey in there, I could just change this word to Mickey, and it would pull up the other picture automatically. Alt text is something you definitely want to use. Screen readers, assistive technology, rely on alt text, alternate text, for folks that can't see the pictures. Folks that can't see pictures appreciate your alternate text because it tells them what you're trying to portray on the page. When their reader comes across an image that doesn't have any alt text, it just either says image or it reads the URL of the image, like this part up here. And they don't know what's going on. They have no idea probably what that picture is all about, because on the web there's a lot of pictures that are named kind of cryptically, and so they really appreciate. So please, please, please include this alt text when you are placing an image on a page. You have image styles that you can use. You can get slightly different styles to your image here, and I don't know if the rounded corners is very hard to see because it's light on light. Polaroid gives you a little gray border there, and then the circle you can see now, that it's kind of cut off in an oval pattern there. That's what that'll do for you. And then position. position is going to be, I'm going to cheat and jump ahead. I'm going to make this smaller. See, this is where you're going to do size stuff here. I'm going to make this significantly smaller. And then I'm going to type, put some content. Now, when I go back here and do this picture, and I set the position, what I'm doing is adding a float tag to the picture when I do the left. When I do left or right, I'm adding a float tag to the picture. So if you do know HTML, you know how float tags work, you understand what that is. And you can see what the effect is, where this some content statement here, this highlighted some content statement is moving. And what I'm actually doing is changing the relative position of the image compared to the text adjacent to it. And so on the left, the text appears to move to the right of the image. If I put the image on the right, then the image is floated clear over to the right of the page and gets out of the way of the text. And so there's good reason for both of those. You can align this. I'm going to move this text now so that we can see this better. Again, here's the picture selected, and we're getting into the picture ribbon. Now, table align top, middle, and bottom. You can see the effect there. What it does is it aligns the center line of the picture with the, in this case, the bottom line of the text, or the middle line of the text. In other words, the middle pixel on the line of text, or the top of the text. And again, that's useful in some contexts for captioning, things like that. More typically, you will see the right or left float for a picture so that the words apparently wrap around. Another thing you might want to insert is a table. And so again, we'll put our cursor where we want it to be. We'll go to the Insert tab and insert a table. We'll insert a small table, and this is the same as other Microsoft products like Word or what have you. You get to select the size of the table initially, and this can be changed within the environment. So there's no need to be precise about this right away. You can just say, you know, I want to put a table in there, and SharePoint will know. One of the things I recommend to people is to always, as soon as you put a table on your page, tell SharePoint that you want to see the grid line. And because there's styling on this table, it doesn't make a bunch of difference. Some tables, there is no styling on. They're just for organization on the page, which I don't recommend people do, but okay. If you're using a no-style table, then editing it becomes much, much easier if you display the grid line. And you'll see that in a moment here. As I said, if you put your cursor somewhere in this table, you have table functionality. You can merge cells, split them. You can insert lines above or below. You can see that table growing. You can insert columns, or you can delete cells, columns, rows, or entire tables. So you can manipulate the table that way. Another way you can manipulate the table is by its size. Now, this table is told that it wants to be 100% as wide as the editing area on the page. Now, if I change that, it will always be relative. In fact, right now, it's always relative. If I change the size of the page, then the size of the table is shrinking down. And if I change the size of the page like this, it will come out to its maximum. This content area has a maximum width to it, and so it will be brought out to its maximum. If I change this percentage, then that table will change in respect to the page width or the content area width. So if I go down to 60% on that, two things you notice. One is it got narrower, and two is that since I brought it down, it'll now fit here where I have given this image a float command already, and so the table was knocked up a little bit in the page because it'll fit now. And so just by using that float command, you have a little bit of control over how things appear horizontally on your page without using tables, which is always a good thing to do. If you can avoid using a table for page organization, please do it. Tables should be used for tabular information, like contact lists, numerical values for whatever you've got, number of cars crossing a bridge or comparatively number of bridges or how many transactions you have per day of a given month or what have you. Tabular data ought to be used in tables. Tables should not be used to organize your page. Okay, so we're back in table now, and then columns and rows can be individually manipulated. Now, one thing that some people run into, especially when pages are converted, they'll run into a page that has a tremendous amount of white space between the entries on the page, between like where the text goes. If you should ever run into that, please come, click into that space somewhere where you've got a tremendous amount of white space, and take a look and see if the table tools become visible. If they do, then you've got a table there, and I bet you what you're going to find is a table height of 2,000 pixels or more. Okay? And you can see what that does. These little dividers here are the individual table cells. And if I only have, one piece of text in each table cell, if there were no styling here, you would have no idea what's going on. Sometimes in a converted page, the table will not have a style. It'll be all white, no grid lines, no borders. The top and left-hand sides will not be identified by these darker bands of color here, so you don't know you're in a table until you put your cursor in there and you see the table tools. And then you go to layout and you see a table height of 2,000 pixels, boom, that's why I've got all that white space. And so if you narrow that down to 100 pixels, your table will not get smaller than it's required by its contents. And so you can shrink it down to less than what it really needs to be, and it will stay at where it needs to be and really improve the look of your page. So that's just a little tip for future use in case you run across it. And that applies, again, to pages that have a tremendous amount of white space between lines or sections of text. And then, let's see, we've already done that. Columns and rows can be individually managed. You can see this row now is 100 pixels high. If you should feel the need, you can. You can manipulate tables any way you need to. And then we have our table design. And you saw that we have a bit of a choice of how we can display our tables here. I'm trying not to change these too fast for the web interface. Subtle differences, but differences nonetheless. So, got a little bit of styling to do. These check marks, these will change the style of the rows that they're applied to. So you can use those, not use those, whatever you decide is appropriate for your table. And all they do is identify a header, first column, a footer. They're useful sometimes if you have tabular data that you're totaling for some reason. You've got maybe monetary values or weights and measures, things like this. You can use those style pieces of the row selections to identify your labels versus your actual data. Okay, so that's a table. And then probably the other thing that is most common on web pages is a link. Now, there's two ways to make a link. One, or two kinds of links that you're going to make. One is a link to the inside, and by inside I'm talking about to another government page. If you are inside of government with your link destination, it should open in the same page, in the same tab. And the way we do that is, again, we're going to insert something slightly different than text. So we go to the Insert tab, and we say Link, and from SharePoint or from Address. Those are our choices. Now, from SharePoint means that it is inside of your site collection. So if you are an OHA web editor, you can choose SharePoint if you are going to any other OHA page. If you're an OHA editor and you are linking to a Department of Administrative Services page, you will go to Address because it is outside of your site collection. It is still inside of Oregon.gov, sure, but it's outside of your site collection. And so some of the from Address will still open in the same page. Now, many times what we've seen, because we use Google Analytics, the option to open in a new tab doesn't happen. And it has to do with the way Google Analytics kind of hijacks our links and counts them the way it needs to and then puts them back in the browser. It loses the command to open in a new tab. That's not really a problem because opening in a new tab sort of goes against accessibility concerns. It's much better now than it was in the past, but it used to be a big issue for screen readers to jump between tabs and jump between pages, windows. Apparently it's not as bad now as it used to be, but accessibility still says, it's a better idea to just open everything in the same tab. So even though Google hijacks and doesn't allow us to open in a new window, it's not entirely a negative thing. And so you will run across that sometimes. So from SharePoint, we're going to establish a link to another place in this site. And Pages, and let's choose the Web Parts page. That is a page within your SharePoint site collection. You can browse to it. If you happen to know the URL, then you could just type the URL in down here, and that will do the job too for a internal page, a page within your site collection. Click OK, and SharePoint will turn for a moment, and you have a link here. You can tell that you have a link here because you have the link tool ribbon up here when your cursor is inside of the text or if the text is highlighted. You have the link tools ribbon. Now, if you want to change something about the link, then you activate that ribbon, and again, you can select the link. It will allow you to completely change. It'll, go, oop, that wasn't the page I wanted, so I'm going to go try a different page. You can remove the link entirely, which will just make that plain text and not have a URL associated with it. You can manually change the URL here in this URL field. Description, not quite as important. It's essentially like alt text, but it's also a tooltip. Bookmark is you have to know how to establish an anchor in HTML in order to use bookmark, but that's how that is. Anything on the right side of the hashtag would go into the bookmark field if you were going to use those. Those of you who know HTML to make anchors know what I'm talking about on that. The others don't need to. There's a document in development that's going to describe all that because I get a lot of requests for that kind of thing. And then here's where you can choose to open it in a new tab. And again, that does not always work. It's not a problem with SharePoint. The site's not broken. It's just the way Google hijacks our code or our links to count them in the way that it needs to count them to be accurate. And then display icon, SharePoint does its best to give you a little bitty icon here that tells you kind of what sort of document you're linking to. In most cases, you're not going to want to use that. You know, if you have a list of links, and some of them are Word, and some of them are PDF, and some of them are, you know, who knows, WordPerfect, then, you know, maybe you would want to use those to show people, you know, which type they're going to open. But generally speaking, a link in the middle of content of a page, you don't want an icon there. It breaks the continuity of the page. But it is available. SharePoint does its best with a little icon that kind of matches what kind of a document you're linking to. And clicking off of the link will remove, see, we don't have that link tools ribbon anymore. Again, if we click back into the link, then we get the link tools back. Now, linking to the outside, I'm going to highlight the text that I want to link, choose to insert, and choose link. And I'm going to go from address. And this shows me the text that I want to display and allows me to enter the address. And now I have that link. Put in my description, and that is now a link. Now, let's say I'm all done. I am going to save the page. Well, okay, so I saved the page. That didn't do anybody any good for nothing. Again, the reason is because that's me and me alone. If somebody came into this page or into this site from the outside, they still wouldn't see that page because I haven't checked it in. All I did was save it. And if something happened in this site to make it kind of reset, I would lose this page because SharePoint doesn't have a hard record of it. And so what I really need to do is check the page in. So I'm going to choose the page ribbon and check in the page. Comments if your agency wants them. Once the page is checked in, we have sort of a preview kind of a view of the page, and we can see our image there, and then we can see our links where we do have a tooltip. This is the description. Those little things that are showing up there are the description field of the link. You can see there's not much difference between the styling of regular text here and the styling of link text here. And so those tooltips really help. And then we want to, once we've checked in, we're sure it's good, we always want to make sure if we have permission, if we're ready, if the program is, you know, if all the ducks are in a row, then we want to publish the page to make it live. Clicking publish in some libraries will do the job. In other libraries, you'll have to submit it to a workflow. It just depends upon your agency and how it's set up. Your spot can show you that if need be. If you're not quite certain yet, then there's always this preview button, and that will remove all of the authoring stuff from the view of the page and show you what your page is going to look like when it's viewed on the web. Okay? There's nothing having to do with the authoring environment here at all. There's no ribbon, no spaces. It takes all that stuff out and shows you what your page is going to look like. The active portions of your page are there. That way you can get a pretty good idea about what's going to happen on that page once it is published. I hope this has been informative and valuable. There will be more sessions on V4 stuff.